But on the other hand, people can become more and more mentally lucid and can live a life that's more intentional, that's more deliberate and on purpose. And presumably, that will condition what it's like after we die. So that if we've lived a mentally lucid life while we're in the body, that will continue into the other side, and we'll have a much more mentally lucid afterlife in which we can do more interesting things and perhaps advance our evolution in some interesting and powerful way. So then we have this period of life, length undefined in the vital world, and then that dies and we go to the mental world. Now in the mental world, the way it's described, and this seems logically coherent, all the beings there are in constant telepathic communion, and telepathy does not respect distance. So in effect, in the mental world, all beings are in immediate proximity with each other, and therefore space as we know it is irrelevant. There's a kind of intimate communion. And so it's also said that because the communion is so intimate, the whole good-evil distinction ceases to have any meaning, because everything is too transparent. Right? And so the mental world is a world in which we enjoy creativity without the shadow of good and evil. And it's said in all the texts that the experience at that phase of the life cycle is quite blissful. And then there's a death, and then we return to the soul. Now the thing is that the soul is in continuous existence throughout the entire process. So it's a different kind of entity. It has a different relationship to time. The soul is presumably eternal and doesn't suffer birth and death. And then there's a sojourn in the soul, they say, in which we digest the life, and then there's a beginning of a new life. And this new life does not really have a continuity of memory with the previous life, except insofar as there's a kind of causal transmission linking one to the other. And this would be a large part of what we call karma, right? A sort of causal linkage between the circumstances and the actions of one life and the actions in a new life. Okay, so this is this new theory of the constitution of the human being, and an examination of the possible theories of reincarnation. Remember I mentioned in the first lecture that there are these cases of the reincarnation type in which young children have memories of past lives, and that these memories can be verified by a skilled investigator, and that they often, the people in these cases, the young children who have past life memories, are often reborn geographically and temporally close to where they died. So what's suggested here, what Sri Aurobindo has suggested about these things, is that there are different routes of reincarnation. So that this one that I'm showing here is the typical route, but it could be that someone could have a lifetime, die, go to the astral world, and then come immediately back to the physical without having gone through the full cycle. And some of the stories these children tell are remarkable. There's one story where the kid said that he had died, and then he had gone and sat in a tree in this empty lot for some very long period of time, months or maybe a few years. And then this person came into the lot that he liked, and he went home with that person and got into his wife's body as a new child, right? So that this particular being had memory of the whole process through the intermediate period between lives. And this would clearly be some kind of truncated reincarnation process, which seems to happen in cases of young, violent death rather regularly. People just aren't finished with life and they want to come back and do it again. So we can see that there are a lot of different routes for reincarnation. It doesn't have to be a single process, but it can be divided up into a lot of different processes. And hopefully we can begin to find ways of doing research to lay out these different kinds of reincarnation process and the conditions under which they happen. So that's all I want to cover this morning. And I'd be really interested again in having conversation about this. And also, we can bring in questions or comments about everything we discussed yesterday and the day before, so we can have a chance for a good discussion.
You were talking about grades of matter yesterday.
Yes.
So what I'm seeing here is that we have to really change our definition of matter.
Yes.
Because then you talk about these disembodied entities.
Yes.
They don't have physical matter.
Yes.
So there's a kind of matter that's not physical. Could you elaborate on that?
Yes, I will. So matter, physical matter, is composed of actual occasions, or events, as physicists would say, right? Matter is composed of momentary events or longer events, but they're always events. And physical matter is always composed of low-grade matter, and we could define the physical world as a self-organizing system of low-grade actual occasions. But there are also, as we said, higher grades of matter. Higher grade because their functioning is more complex. Their apprehension of the world is deeper, their possibilities for action are freer, and so forth, right? So the vital world would then be a self-organizing system of actual occasions of medium grade, and the mental world would be a self-organizing system of actual occasions of high grade. Now, obviously, grade is continuous, and so this division into matter, vital, and mental is somewhat arbitrary. And we may decide that we don't like it, but it's a convenient way of discussing the situation. But the basic idea is that because all matter is made of events, and because all events are drops of experience on the inside, we can have different grades of matter depending on how rich the experience is. Every conscious experience is actual. And as actual, it is causally binding on the future. The materiality is the way an actuality is causally binding on the future. And the mentality is the process of decision that goes into that. But there's matter all the way up and all the way down.
So on the vital level, you have tissues and cells.
Yes.
So, but that when we die, we lose the macromolecules.
That's right.
We also lose the tissues and cells, or
well, here's the thing.
It depends how do you find them.
Well, let's say this. Let's, for example, I'm not sure where the break happens, but let's talk about a cell. As we said the other day, a cell consists of a system of macromolecules organized by a sequence of higher grade actual occasions. Right now, we can imagine that the macromolecules could fall away, but the sequence of actual occasions that was ordering the cell could continue. So in effect, the cell itself could have an afterlife, right? Because a cell consists of all the macromolecules and a higher grade actual occasion, or a higher grade personality, which are separate entities. And the higher grade personality ordering the cell is not physical. It cannot be detected by physical instruments. It can only be detected indirectly by its effect on the macromolecules that it organizes. Yes, Julianne.
So would that explain then why some people actually see the dead?
Yes.
You know, so that the cells aren't physical, but like some psychic people can actually see a form?
That's exactly it, right? That's what the Theosophists call this the etheric body. And we could speculate that the etheric body, or the ghost, right, consists of those actual occasions that were organizing the macromolecules but aren't anymore, right? So it's sort of ghostly, right, because it doesn't have the molecules anymore, but it still has the form of the body that it's accustomed to carrying.
And if I
Good question.
to build on that, when we were talking yesterday about people in a dream state, for example, grasping an image of a personality, a famous person.
Yes.
And it may not actually be that famous person, but it may be the image of that person.
Yes.
So a representation of that person. Just in the same way of what Juliana just described of a medium or a seer being able to see a person who has passed, it may not be actually, I'm just projecting here, that it may not be that person's cells, but actually the energy of that person projecting back into those cells. So the cells that did exist, and because that's what we would recognize, just like what we would recognize by what we see as a famous person. Does that concur?
I think it's a little tricky, and the idea I was talking about yesterday is that certain figures that a lot of people imagine, like Jean-Luc Picard or Sherlock Holmes, right? Now that an image can form of them in the vital world, which is not really an ensouled being, or it doesn't have its own connection to the soul. I'm not sure that's the same thing as the ghost would be, but I don't exactly know, right? So you're asking some fine discriminations that we need some more research to really make these clearly. But I would suspect, on the surface, that when I die, there's an etheric body or a body made up of those intelligences that were organizing my cells, that are still sort of holding on to their pattern, even though they aren't doing the work of organizing the cells. And that really is a body in which I'm existing, right? Whereas the image wouldn't necessarily be anybody's image.
If we go back to your model of evolutionary theory of soul reincarnation,
Yes.
which are there right now, then, and if a person has passed from the physical to the vital and up to the mental, and if a medium or seer back on the physical level is wanting to interact with that person, yet they've moved to the mental,
Yes.
let's say they're on somewhere on the soul level, but beyond where they have any real tie to the vital, where you have the cells and the tissues.
Yes.
They may reach back in a way.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
To grasp that personality where the medium would recognize.
That makes total sense. So then there's two different ways that someone could see a ghost. One is the person has just died
Right.
and is still in the ghost, as it were. But the other one is that another being that is not embodied might project themselves down into that level.
Exactly.
And I've read about that quite a bit in literature. They talk about how these higher beings can come as low as the low astral or the etheric and form bodies of expression at that level. Absolutely, yes. That would be easily accommodated by the theory. It would be expected in this theory that would be the case. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.